Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to another event hosted by the Warsaw Institute. Today we'll speak about the outcome and new composition after recent UK general elections. And today with me, my pleasure to introduce my today's guests. First of all, Bartłomiej Kot, Resident Fellow Casimir Pułaski Foundation, as well as Program Director for Warsaw Security Forum.
Hello, lovely to be here with you.
Thank you. And Robert Tyler, Senior Policy Advisor for New Direction. Hello, Robert.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our event is organized with support of National Institute of Freedom. And I think now we can begin our discussion on UK general elections. So indeed, we do have a new composition, a huge win for the Labours, a huge loss for Conservatives. I would start with a general question to you, gentlemen. First of all, if you could tell me what were the key factors influencing the outcome of the elections, and was the result, the win of Labour's, more due to good performance of Labour's in campaign or poor performance of Conservatives while governing the UK. So first of all, I would give the floor to Bartłomiej Kot.
Hi, hello. So basically speaking, of course, maybe a bit different to what we experience here in Poland, where the issues such as foreign policy are the predominant aspect of everyday politics. In the UK during the campaign, I would say that economy was, of course, the most important part of the discussion. The state of the country, after, of course, 14 years of governance of the Conservative Party, issues such as the state of National Health Service, for example, but also the costs of everyday living for each and every single Briton. Those are the elements that were quite widely discussed during the campaign. What I could actually add to that would be possibly the discussion around the migration issue, because of the fact that the Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak himself, he made quite a cause out of this subject during the campaign. Let me just remind you that actually the campaign started right after the announcement of Rwanda bill, so there was very much a context, and of course the migration is one of those issues that are one of the key topics of the British politics since at least Brexit. Another question that you asked, the performance of both parties during the campaign. Well, I would say that Labour Party did less. Okay, so to put it that way, I mean, people are saying that they did quite a good job when it comes to the online marketing. I saw the numbers that were spent on targeted ads, and there was quite a huge amount of staff of the party that was engaged in cooperating with each and every single MP. Issues such as, like, for example, the social media marketing that was done directly by the party, not by the MPs themselves. That was very helpful, and people are saying that actually, when it comes to the way the online campaign was conducted, that was a very good example of how this should be done. But at the same time, of course, we had debates. When it comes to the TV debates, I would say that Rishi Sunak performed better than Keir Starmer. There is some issue with Starmer himself, in a sense that people are voting for change. There is lack of, I would say, emotional bond with the person of Starmer himself, with Keir Starmer himself. He seems to be a very solid politician, but PR people did not fall in love with him as they did with Blair over 20 years ago. So I'll stop here and over to you.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Indeed, migration was a interesting topic of heated debate. And on the other hand, social media marketing, internet marketing during electoral campaign is still one of key factors during elections. Robert Tyler, I'm addressing the same question to you about factors influencing the outcomes, and was it due to good performance of Labour's or worse performance of previous government?
Thank you very much. I have to admit that I agree with a lot of what's just been said. In particular, this factor that Keir Starmer is not the heir to Tony Blair. If you look at some of the numbers, his approval ratings coming into Downing Street are already in the negative, showing that people aren't really fully behind him. The other thing that you find quite interesting is because of the way the British electoral system works, whilst he's coming in with a huge parliamentary majority, that majority on the electoral level is very thin. One of the sort of fascinating results of this is the first elections to take place since the boundary review. So effectively what's happened is that the parliamentary constituencies have been redrawn, supposedly to make them more equal. And what happened is that the majorities, including in Labour safe seats, collapsed. So in a lot of places, I think the median vote or median majority in the constituency now is about 6,000 votes, which means that a lot more of them could very easily swing back the other way in another general election. And I think a large part of that is down to the fact there was a very low turnout for this election. Historically, in the last two elections, we've been used to increases in voter turnout. We've been in excess of 60%. We saw that people, that there was a lot more enthusiasm and people felt there was a lot more at stake in the election. This time it was considered a very low stakes election, and so people didn't really come out to vote. And I think part of that was because the Conservatives failed to engage with their own voters and to really enthuse people. But at the same time, those people who did come out were really coming out because they wanted to punish the Conservative government after 14 years and what they have seen as the last 5 years of mismanagement. There's no denying that the Conservative Party, despite winning that huge majority in 2019, has not had a very smooth term of office, going through 3 prime ministers quite rapidly. I think the other thing that sort of strikes me as quite interesting is that this low turnout has also produced some sort of surprising results outside of the 2 main parties. So we saw a huge swing towards third parties that have pushed both Labour and Conservatives to their lowest joint score since 1918. So I think both Labour and the Conservatives combined now represent less than 60% of the vote, which we've not seen in the United Kingdom for more than 100 years. So I think there's a lot at play. It's partly a Conservative defeat, and I think it's partly Labour profiting off that. But I wouldn't say that it's the overwhelming majority that Keir Starmer or the Labour Party expected.
Thank you very much, Robert. Before we move to the next question, I have one follow-up questions to you after what you've just said about the current new Prime Minister. As far as I understood, you underlined that he doesn't have such a strong mandate and recognition among the British people. So I'd like to just ask you for short opinion. How do you see his position for the upcoming years in the government? Will he be a really strong figure representing firmly UK within the world, or will he be more like executive, professional, not very visible on the international area? Bartłomiej Kot.
Well, the issue is that people do not feel the emotional link to Starmer as a person. Maybe that's because of how he, sells himself, what kind of the language he uses, what kind of a person he is. Maybe those are the very personal characteristics of him as a person. It is not at the same time that they do not consider him as a solid politician. In my very own opinion, he's actually the one who has a very interesting career path of career in public service. Prior to becoming a politician, he was, of course, in the prosecutor's office. So he's not a person whom you can easily like on the basis of his characteristics as a human being. But at the same time, it is a completely different story related to the fact how you judge his political abilities or his capability to govern, firstly party and then secondly the government. For the sake of an argument, I would say that he is at the same time a person who saved the Labour Party from the era of Corbyn, and basically speaking, developed it to the moment where it has the biggest majority in the parliament, possibly ever. So those are the success stories of Keir Starmer, and in a sense, it also shows you how much of a successful politician he is in terms also of the internal party politics. The issue here would be, of course, whether he will be capable of establishing a kind of a bond with an electorate that would basically speaking profit for him and for the party in years to come. At the same time, I heard recently a very good argument, but this is basically speaking on the level of the paradigm of politics as such. Whether we should be discussing the person of the prime minister as we discuss sometimes celebrities, whether that is necessary for the modern day politics to have this emotional bond with the person who governs, or should that person be simply speaking judged on the basis of his performance as the politician? The modern politics is also the politics related to what kind of an Instagram profile you have, whether people like you or not necessarily whether they judge you properly on the basis of your conduct as the politician. And so at the same, these are the elements that certainly impact him and his capability to govern. But honestly speaking, I mean, with that many MPs in the parliament, with quite a clear mood also around the capitals in Europe, I would say that the impact of the election is right now a positive wave for Labour and for the government. That's one thing, and secondly, I can only underline the fact that it was also very intelligent to put progressive realism as a buzzword for the foreign policy of this government, because they have already projected the message to even to people such as Trump that it doesn't matter who will be governing in the US. They would try to have a proper special relationship bond with all those countries on the basis of the interests of the UK. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that. Let's move to Robert with the same question of strength of mandate for the new prime minister and public bond with the newly appointed prime minister, please.
Yeah, I think the reality is that he's very much aware that he didn't get the result that he wanted to. He knows that he didn't get as many votes as Jeremy Corbyn did going into opposition. So he recognized already that, he doesn't have the mandate for major radical progressive left-wing changes. And I think that's been reflected already in some of his first speeches and some of the first policy output to come from this new government. The tone he struck on the steps of number 10 Downing Street was very conciliatory. It was very much about, okay, there's all the people who voted for us, but there's even more people who didn't vote for us, and we have to be prepared to serve them and do things for them. And so much of the agenda that's already been outlined has been focused on sort of mainstream policy areas that people really wanted to get addressed during the election. So talking about the health service, talking about the housing crisis, talking about the cost of living. He's leaving some of the other headline items that worried people to one side. But it is also interesting that, in these early days, by accident almost, he's been forced to deal with foreign policy, which is perhaps something that people don't always pay much attention to. The election was timed in a way that the new prime minister was immediately set to fly to Washington for the NATO summit. and then next week they'll be hosting the European Political Summit. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Whether over time he starts to test the waters a bit and become more radical is yet to be seen. I know that there are certainly people on the backbenches of the Labour Party who are looking for something much more radical, something much more progressive. But for the time being, I think he's focused on basically presenting himself as a kind of stable, almost, I would say, boring prime minister, sort of none of the flashiness of previous prime ministers.
Thank you very much for summing that up. In the meantime, I highly encourage our viewers to ask questions in the chat. Gentlemen, we quickly summed up the outcomes for the two major parties, but now I'd like to move on to the policy. I'd like to ask you, what major shifts in policies would you expect from the new government, especially when it comes to foreign policy regarding Europe and Ukraine? We'll stay with Robert for that question.
Okay, interestingly, when it comes to foreign policy, I think this is one of those areas that will almost certainly see continuity, at least to begin with. We already know that the Labour Party and Keir Starmer have made sure that they are committed to Ukraine, that they are going to carry on the work that the Conservatives have done over the last, well, it's not even the last few years. The Conservatives were really ahead on supporting Ukraine, even after the illegal annexation of Crimea and the proxy war in the Donbass. So Britain's position there hasn't changed at all. I think what's more interesting is how Labour will address the issue of Europe. There's certainly this feeling that they want to move towards a tone of reconciliation. They aren't planning on overturning the Brexit referendum. They aren't planning on taking the United Kingdom back into the European Union, but they're very interested in this idea of developing closer economic ties. There's been talk already about signing some kind of a new security compact with European member states to develop some kind of closer cooperation. We don't know what that looks like yet. I think a part of it will probably focus on training, support, logistics, and procurement. Obviously, the UK is heavily involved in NATO, so the advanced forward presence in the Baltic states will continue, and British troops being stationed towards the Polish border with Belarus, I don't think that'll change either. I think in terms of Europe, I think it's interesting to see whether Labour will adjust to the new realities. One of the things that I'm not sure they're prepared for is the fact that Europe as a continent has changed quite a lot since the last time the Labour Party was in power in 2010. It's not just Brexit that's changed, but it's also the dynamics within the European Union. When Labour was last in power, it was a tripartite leadership. It was the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, and we've seen that France and Germany have become increasingly weakened in the European Council, and other countries such as Italy, Poland, and the Baltic states take the lead on different issues. So it'll be interesting to observe how Labour adjusts to this new reality. Already David Lammy has visited Warsaw, which I think is a promising step. Hopefully they continue to boost that relationship with Central and Eastern Europe and recognize that they've really got strong allies there to work with.
Thank you very mumuch, Robert. So as you've mentioned, continuity when it comes to Ukraine and a new approach towards European Union. Before we move to Bartłomiej, I have one follow-up question from the chat. I think you already answered this, but is the new UK Prime Minister pro or anti-EU? Just if you could briefly sum this up.
It's interesting because Keir Starmer himself has been very careful on this question. He's tried very hard not to talk about the European Union, especially not about membership of the European Union. He was very much a vocal Remainer during the referendum. He was in favor of staying in the European Union. But I think at the outset of him coming into Downing Street, his focus is more on let's reset the relationship as it is rather than pursuing something new or going back to how it was before.
Thank you very much. So now we are moving to Bartłomiej with the same question of potential policy changes and shifts, especially in the area of foreign policy. And as well, Same question from the chat on the new prime minister. Is he more pro or anti-European Union? The floor is yours.
Well, basically speaking, I would actually agree with a lot of what Robert said. So no big changes when it comes to the to NATO stance. No big changes when it comes to support given to Ukraine. Certainly, there is a honeymoon period between UK and the European Union right now. There are some ideas that are coming from the Labour side related to this security and defense compact that was mentioned. I suspect that given the fact that there is also an interest from the other side, at least from a couple of countries that are interested in a stronger cooperation on this European pillar of first of all, of course, NATO, but the cooperation between NATO and EU also in terms of production capability, defense production capabilities. There will be a platform on which we could actually build a new kind of relationship with UK under the Labour Party government right now. What I already mentioned was this progressive realism. So the approach in foreign policy that is based on an assumption that the government will be progressive in terms of its values, maybe also the policies within the United Kingdom, but also very realistic when it comes to this to the approach to its partners and what kind of relationships it will it will seek to build with partners. The announcements that were already somewhere around, even during the TV debates from Sir Keir's side, were actually related to the possible Trump's presidency, the second Trump's presidency, when he said that, basically speaking, they will have to cooperate with whoever is there in the White House. The second issue is, of course, Gaza, which is a very problematic case, in my opinion, for the Labour Party, even more problematic than it was for the Conservative Party, basically speaking, because of the fact that they had some kind of a move when it comes to the electorate, the usual Labour electorate that actually fled to some independent candidates on the basis of, they would say, not a clear stance of the Labour Party on the issue of Palestine and the support given to the people of Palestine. So that might be the case in the future in terms of how they would try to react to that. Maybe that may be more of an issue within the Labour Party itself than an issue for the foreign policy of the government, because Starmer is quite vocal about a continuation also in this regard, basically speaking, when it comes to the policy of the UK, also the cooperation with the US and the idea for a peace plan that was produced by the Biden administration. So that's another, of course, issue. So a lot of continuation, maybe a bit of a honeymoon period for the new government, especially in terms of the relationship with the European Union. From our point of view, from the Polish point of view, nothing big changes, and that's good. Let me put it that way. I spoke with a lot of the Labour politicians before the elections, also members of at that time shadow cabinet. Right now, people that are also part of the new cabinet, and they were very much interested also in the dynamics behind the Weimar Triangle, and also observing that how much Poland is becoming more impactful in terms of the internal politics of the European Union. In my opinion, from the usual, but that would be the same, in my opinion, also for the for the Conservative Party. So using, of course, the good cooperation and good platform the UK as a country has with Poland, in order to pursue some of the interests within the European Union, given the fact that Poland is, of course, a growing, maybe even a power within the European Union. Yeah. So that's it on my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bartłomiej. So as you've mentioned, business continuity, progressive realism in foreign policy, as well as a problematic case of situation in Gaza that we need to observe for the newly elected government of UK. Gentlemen, let's get back to parties and election results. In general, in Europe, recently we've observed a rise and increase of support for conservative and right-wing parties. We have slightly different situation in UK. Conservatives losing over 250 seats. Rishi Sunak stepping down. On the other hand, Nigel Farage's right-wing party gaining 5 seats, and Nigel Farage stepping into parliament for the first time. My question to you is, how do you see the position and the support for conservative and right-wing parties in UK in upcoming months and even upcoming term? Will the support decrease? Will it increase? Will they be still on the second or even more far place after the other parties? How do you see the situation of right-wing parties? Robert Tyler.
I think there's no doubt that the Conservative Party is going to go through a period of uncertainty. It always happens after losing a general election, and especially when you lose an election just as badly as that. It was certainly the case after 1997 that it took 15 years to come back to power. Although I think this time the Conservative Party is sort of self-aware enough, and a lot of the talk amongst the MPs who were re-elected is about how they need to come together, they need to prevent any kind of infighting, really rally behind a new leader quickly, and start holding the Labour government to account. And I think it's again, it goes back to the fact that there's this realization that the electoral foundation that this Labour government is built on is quite weak, and that it really wouldn't take much at another general election to overturn it and replace it with something else. But of course, that the challenge then is, where did the Conservative voters go in this election? Now, some obviously went to Labour in some seats, a lot went to the Liberal Democrats, but a huge amount went to Nigel Farage's Reform Party. And there's really a big discussion now about how do you address that issue? How do you bring those voters back, especially the ones in the sort of north of the country, in the north of England, who in 2019 backed Boris Johnson, but have clearly not found a reason to back Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party. And so there'll be a lot of discussion about that. But I think even more to the point is how many Conservatives were just not enthused to come out and vote or campaign at all during this election, and how you win them over again. And I think what needs to happen is to re-engage the party membership in a way that they feel like they have a say and that they feel like they're involved. In surveys that have been done of Conservative voters who didn't turn up for the election, a lot of them have felt that the party was moving away from their core values. And there's a need to rediscover what that means. And I think the next year will be dominated by this kind of soul searching and finding the new leader. In the meantime, we're told that Rishi Sunak will stay on for a couple of months until the Conservative Party can organize itself to hold a leadership election, so that they can find whichever new MP it is to become the new leader of the opposition. And then from there, it's really about reconnecting with the public in the right way.
Thank you very much, Robert, especially for underlining this case of leadership among the political parties. Now let's move with the same question to Bartłomiej about the future of conservatives and right-wing parties in UK for the next months and the current term of parliament.
So I would actually pick up on two observations of Robert, which I actually agree with. The first one was the one about the swing vote impact. So yes, basically speaking, the red wall, people are saying that the red wall was rebuilt. The truth is, however, this is actually the swing vote electorate all the time. So on the whether they will stay with the Labour Party for years to come will depend on the performance of this government. In my opinion, it is not the fact that that Labour Party regained the full trust of this electorate as it was before the Brexit time. It is rather actually the fact that this part of the electorate was fed up with the way that the country was governed, fed up with some of the undelivered promises related to Brexit, but also to migration and stuff like that. So it is still actually a very much the electorate that can swing to anyone else, including actually Reform UK, on the basis of the performance of the new government. So in a sense, whether the Labour Party will govern well or good or poorly will also have an impact on whether the British politics will derive election after the election from the establishment, from the core of from the two parties. So what I'm trying to say is that if the Labour government right now will not deliver on the promises of change, will not deliver on the promises of rebuilding the state of the country itself, things such as migration, such as NHS, etc., etc., we will have a boost in support of the parties that are not the part of the political establishment of the UK. So out of those two big established parties, such as Labour Party and the Conservatives. Parties such as Reform UK will gain votes. And this is basically speaking also the story about the future of the alt-right, the future of Reform UK within the UK. In a sense, that might be quite tricky, and maybe that's even a paradox. If the Labour Party will govern well during their upcoming years in power, in a sense, they can also prevent the Conservative Party from a split, from also some kind of a leakage of the electorate to the Reform UK. So in a sense, a good governance from the Labour Party is also a preservation of the political establishment in UK. That is my opinion when it comes to that.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting what you've mentioned about the swing electorate in the UK. And let's keep you here, Bartłomiej, for the next question and the last question for today that we got from one of our viewers. Will the gains made by Reform Party, led by Nigel Farage, pressure the new Prime Minister to tighten border security? This is a pretty specific question, but I'm addressing it to you from one of our viewers. So will the Reform Party pressure new PM to tighten border security?
Well, honestly speaking, everyone knows that migration is an issue in the UK. And the performance of the government related to the migration is one of the key elements on whether the government will be treated, the performance of the government as such will be treated as successful or not. People are observing that issue. As I mentioned a second ago, people, especially from those constituencies that swing to the Labour Party, are looking forward to how the government will act on the issues related to migration. So, in a sense, yes, in my opinion, the performance of the government on the migration issue will have a huge impact on the future of this government. Of course, there might be a nuanced approach related to, for example, not a big statement related to European Convention of Human Rights, as was done by Rishi Sunak. Maybe a lot of more focus, especially in terms of a narrative related to fighting with crime, such as the human trafficking, etc., etc., rather than boosting the Rwanda bill narrative. But in a sense, the new government will also have to deliver on migration. I cannot imagine a different story. Because indeed, as I said, if the government will not deliver on migration, this will boost the performance of Reform UK, which is not in favor of neither the Labour Party nor it is in favor of Conservative Party.
Thank you very much. So, as you said, the new government has to deliver a lot of work in terms of migration and security. And now I will give the floor to Robert Tyler with the same question from our viewer on Nigel Farage's party impact on border security. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think that that assessment is absolutely correct. And if you look at where Reform placed second during this election, in most of those seats, it wasn't behind the Conservative. It wasn't in safe Conservative seats. It was in historically safe Labour seats. Reform is definitely on the mind of the Prime Minister when it comes to his fragile electoral majority, because when the exit poll first came out, it was suggested that Reform would have a lot more seats. And I think that most of the pollsters had predicted that those were in the so-called red wall area. So I think he knows that a lot of people who voted for him on this basis that he's more likely to get immigration done. I would say that it's not just Reform who are going to be putting pressure on him for this, but I think whoever becomes the new leader of the Conservative Party will also be there across the dispatch box from the Prime Minister, reminding him on a weekly basis at Prime Minister's question time that the migration situation needs to be brought back under control, in particular the small boats. It's interesting that this was, of course, one of the first areas that he tried to address. He created this new team within the Home Office. He's talked about creating a sort of streamlined approach to managing the small boat arrivals. So we'll have to see whether any of that yields results in the end, but it'll certainly be at the top of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Robert, for your detailed response to that question. And with your response, we've come to an end of our today's debate. Gentlemen, I want to take this opportunity to thank you once again for sharing your expert views with our observers on UK general elections. And hereby, I'd like to remind our viewers that tomorrow we have another online event during which we'll sum up the French snap elections that took place on 7th of July. So, gentlemen, once again, thank you very much, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the day.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you.
Thank you.